You're listening to Business Stories with Ryan R. Karachi, a podcast dedicated to helping entrepreneurs become even more successful. Let's jump into today's episode. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Business Stories podcast. This is a special edition episode. You may or may not know that I work with a lot of brokers and consultants in the franchising space using Clienttether as a tool. And so I really wanted to create this episode for people out there, you yourself who may be a broker consultant looking at a tool or maybe using Clienttether, or just out there wanting to learn more about tools that are available to people in your shoes. And just like buying a car, like obviously, you can go talk to a car salesman, but the real feedback is people that actually drive the car, use the car, bought the car. They can tell you what the car is actually like. So I think with Clienttether and other tools, it's good to hear from people that are actually using the system, to hear their feedback, their experiences, their usage of it, their tips, their tricks, their ideas. So I'm bringing on Deene Yenchochic. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I pronounce your name
Perfect.
right, Jeannie. But you are with BAI, and I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself, your background in franchising, and then we're going to talk a little bit about your experience with the tool. But thank you for joining me. Tell everybody about your background and what you're doing with BAI.
Sure. So I'm a franchise consultant, which advisor, coach, whatever you want to call it, broker. And I've been with BAI for a few years. I'm also a franchise owner. I have 4 territories in Southwest Florida of Dog Training Elite franchise. I also, for 16 years, I had a franchised campground in the KOA, the Campgrounds of America system, and sold that in 2020. Moved to Florida full time. That was in Western Southwest Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So I have experience in being an franchise owner, franchisee. For Dog Training Elite, I'm also on the Franchise Advisory Council, so I represent the Southeast states for franchisees, and so I get to hear a lot of the feedback from the franchisees about support and that kind of thing. So that kind of gives me some insights as from the broker side, to say, okay, this is what people are happy about, mad about once they're in, and I can kind of help people prepare for that before they sign on the dotted line. So anyways, some different perspectives I bring to it.
That's great. I mean, you have both sides. I mean, you've got the consulting side, you've been a franchisee, you've got, a lot of years of experience. So let's talk about sort of your experience with Clienttether, because you came into BAI. I don't think you had Clienttether right away, but you transitioned into, using it. Talk to us about that experience before and after and what the onboarding was like and what your thoughts are with that.
Yeah, so I used, I've used a lot of different CRMs over the years because I also worked in higher ed, so they changed things constantly, and so you had to learn those. But for BAI, I started with, I think the only one I used was Zoho.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used that, and I got pretty good at just trying to figure that out. But then I switched to Clienttether just a few months ago, maybe, I guess it's been September was
Mm-hmm.
probably, so, but that's a few months now.
Yep.
What I love about Clienttether, one of the main things is I love that texting is integrated into the system. I don't have to have a separate client for that. It still worked doing it that way, but it just felt clunky to me.
Right.
And so I love that that's integrated. I love that because it's integrated, I can view a contact file. I can look at my lead, or my candidate, if they're in the pipeline, and I can see everything like emails, text. It just refreshes that whole conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I may not have to type a note up after every conversation because I can kind of just see it. It's there when I pull that up. So I do love the texting part of that. I like the automated drip campaigns. Now, you can do that in every CRM. I also use ServiceMinder for the dog training business.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like how how client tether, just how the functionality of being able to create those, edit them. I can, easily go into a candidate file, their account and change something ad hoc if I want to. And so, I do like that. And setting up the actual drip campaigns, like the cadence of those.
Yeah.
And maybe I just wasn't an expert enough, but it seemed more complicated in Zoho. I
Hmm.
felt like I had to learn different trees and, different, I don't know, just different pathways of mapping that I don't feel like I even have to worry about. Like you worry about that, and I just click and create something and add like what day I want it to go. That
Right.
just seems easier to me, with Client Tether. And I do like the ability to do the ad hoc templates for text and emails, because I find that I can use those for quick responses. And, even if I don't use it exactly how it is, there are a few, like there are just things that are pretty common responses that I'm going to have early in the process. And even maybe later in the process, like referring to, like, I'm going to send you a confidential questionnaire, or, I sent it, check your email. It's just kind of nice to have those quick templates to be able to, just use the drop down and send those. So those are kind of the top things that I like about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the onboarding experience? Like, walk us through what
Mhm.
that was like for you. I mean, you've used other tools years back, you've had support from other tools. I'm thinking, how do you think our onboarding compares to those, and what was the onboarding experience like for you in particular?
Sure. So it was fantastic. I thought it was a great onboarding. For Zoho, for example, I had to actually have a separate company that helped manage. And so that was like another fee.
Yeah.
That company was great, but I felt like you're just stacking on vendors that you're trying to use to do this. And so with Client Tether, what I liked was that it was just very deliberate. And Alana is who worked with me
Yep.
and who still works with me, and answers all my crazy questions and fixes everything I break, because I do tinker in there.
Yeah.
Um, but she's always great about that. But I thought the step-by-step process was good. And I felt like the way that she handled it was helping me to build on what I needed to learn, and the functionality. And like I said, I did have some experience in just the logic of how CRMs work,
Hmm.
um, but probably, and I said this to her, I know enough to break it. And so
Right.
she handled me very well. And I thought the onboarding was great compared to, other systems that I've used. For example, with ServiceMinder, we just had some videos and, you know, just kind of figure it out. So this has been a great experience with that.
I feel like a lot of companies, and I'm not saying this to knock them, but they try to streamline support and onboarding by just sending videos and articles or a support page and kind of letting you figure it out yourself. And I think that we try to be a little more hands-on, a little more proactive, having those one-on-one conversations, because I think questions come up when you watch a video or you read an article that if you're just watching a video or reading an article, you can't get answered if a live person's not there to help you. So, what's your opinion on that? Do you feel like it was a better experience just having that person live, available to support you instead of just getting a video or an article?
Absolutely, because I feel like the most important part of training when you're the trainer is understanding that the trainee doesn't know what they don't know.
Right.
And so I don't know what video to look for if I don't know that it's even a functionality that I should be using. And
Right.
so I think that it's super important that that personal touch, to be able to say, okay, here's what it can do, and here's the very beginning steps, and just even kind of how, as simple as like the hours of operation that you have control, and saying you're open for business Monday through Friday or 7 days a week, what those hours are and how that affects your drip campaigns and everything else,
Yeah.
you wouldn't even know to ask that question.
Right.
And so I think it's super valuable to have a person in the beginning starting and meeting you where you are.
Hmm.
Like I said, I knew some stuff, but I didn't know this system. And
Yeah.
I know there's logic to all of it, but having that person step me through it was great. Now the videos, the help desk, the help center, I go there and it makes sense now. But I feel like you need that individual training first
Yep.
before you even know what to look for and to help it make sense and even to challenge and say, okay, what can this system do for me? It should be a workhorse. It
Right.
should be doing a lot for me. But I think it's important to know those fundamentals first. And to me, it's so much quicker to get up and running if you just have a person walking you through it.
Right. And I think the other piece of that is it's an application, right? Like you can learn what a system does and you can watch videos and articles, but the question is how do you apply it to your own strategy, right? It's
Mhm.
about the application of what you learn, and I think that's where we help. Our whole team is committed to making sure people apply the functions to their processes and to their strategy to be successful because if you can't do that, then it's just a waste. Uh, so, Deanie, let's talk about too. Like, can you give us some specific examples or stories just of your usage where it's just been a time saver for you, or just improved your processes, or made your work easier? Can you pick out any particular scenarios or situations where that's happened for you?
Well, I am awful, and I probably shouldn't even admit this, but I'm awful at making the outgoing phone calls.
Right.
I'm just, and I can give every excuse in the book that I'm doing the other business and blah, 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 all that stuff. I've just in my entire career been bad at that.
Hmm.
I love talking to people, love talking on the phone, making an appointment and doing all that, but I'm just not good at the initial like, hey, you just called
Yeah.
or you just requested information.
Right.
But I make the calls, I leave the messages. No one ever answers their phone.
Hmm.
But because of the drip campaigns, on day zero, immediately, someone gets an email, which no one opens, by the way, that first one. I think it gets lost in I don't know where it goes because
Yeah.
they do open day one.
Right.
But day zero, immediately they get the email, and then a minute later they get a text. And for me, that means if I'm not making that phone call that immediate time, which I know I'm going to get in all kind of trouble for admitting I'm not doing that
Hmm.
consistently, that text is just as important, I think, because but what I've learned is the what you put in that text completely determines whether it's an actual trigger or it's just another one. People are getting bombarded. I'm not the only person that is texting them or
Right.
emailing them.
Yeah.
And so to be able to stand out, I've really had to tinker with that. But I think the time saver is that I know I'm not throwing money away with the leads because there is a contact. And so, I'm still going to make that phone call, but I know they're getting the text. And I think we're getting to a point where people they appreciate getting the text and not having the phone ring.
Right.
Um, I could be wrong. There's, you guys have all the data and all of that, but um, the drip campaigns to me are the number one time saver because even if as I kind of look back and I'm constantly tweaking content and subject lines and what's in the text, what's in the email, that kind of thing. And when I look at my current pipeline, um, I have people who it has taken 5 weeks
Hmm.
from as little as day zero to all the way to 5 weeks for them to do something. And what I consider a trigger is that they um, either respond to my text and I have at least like one or two texts back and forth with them, and then they book a call, or they self-book on my Calendly from, an email because I push that. Um, or we just immediately, I say, hey, do you have time right now? And they say yes, and I call them.
Right.
But like that's to me that, and that stops the drip campaign. That has been, some of them have been 5 weeks in, which means over that 5 weeks, they've gotten 9 emails and 7 texts from me.
Hmm.
And they finally said, okay, yeah, let's talk.
Yeah.
I feel like if you give up, that's like proof you can't give up. It just wasn't the right time.
Right.
And so it's, if I had to keep track of all of that and say, well, I didn't call them, I need to send them an email, I need to do this, the system just does it.
Yeah.
And so that's, I mean, it's, I don't want to sound like, it's like, geez, that's a great new idea. That's what the systems do, but it's effective. It works.
Yeah.
And I don't have to think about it.
Right. And you make an interesting point because 5 weeks is a fairly long time to try to manage those emails and those texts and everything. And if you can create a 5 week, and it's good that you have that number because maybe 5, 6 weeks is typically the sweet spot for creating a campaign. So you know that if they're not going to respond by that time, they're probably not a good lead. And you can basically just turn it off or nurture them a little bit here and there, maybe for the next several months. But um, that's interesting that you've kind of noticed that. I mean, I want to ask you too. So if people are listening to this, someone's listening to this, they don't have client tether, but they are searching, or they do, and they just want insights. But if they're out there shopping around as a franchise professional, franchise broker, consultant, or even a franchisor, um, what advice can you give them as they're kind of out there in the market and getting bombarded with other tools out there like your Zoho, your Pipe Drive, or what have you? Plus, there's new ones popping up all the time. Before they jump into something like Client Tether, what's your advice on how they should approach, you know, thinking about this?
Yeah, I think that, I think all of the systems do what you want them to do,
Yeah,
right? They're all basically going to logically run the same way. But in my experience with CRMs and any technology that I've used, like I said, even when I worked in higher ed, we always had some kind of technology we were using.
yeah,
We did even like course development. We were doing online course programming. They thought we were witches when we were doing it because it was 20 years before COVID.
yeah,
Um, the the most important part, I think, of any technology is the actual tech support that you have,
yeah,
because the tools should work. And your training and your support are actually what makes it super effective or just a baseline program.
right,
And whether you spend $1 million on it or $100 a month, if you're not using it right, which means are you trained on it? And if something breaks or you break something, or you just want to say, but I'd like to do X, Y, Z, is that possible? You need support. So in my experience, what I've had from Client Tether so far has been excellent with that tech support, and even the updates, the updates that you do regularly, they're like not just like, I don't understand what these mean. They
mhm,
actually meant something. And I thought, oh, that's a great idea. I'm glad they did that. Like, I didn't even ask. So I like those updates. So the tech support, um, and then just that initial training, and even, ongoing. If I contact Alana, she shows me how to do things if I want to do things. So, I guess that's, that it all goes back to what do you want the system to do for you? And then do you have someone who's going to actually work with the vendor to make that happen? And, for me as a broker, this system works. It works for me.
And I also want to, I mean, I appreciate that. And I also want to make a point that not only is our support team available, but also people like me are available. I'm passionate about helping brokers and consultants be successful because I know it's not easy being a one person shop trying to run a business on your own. You're juggling a lot and it can be stressful. So I think, having a system like this is going to help you, but it's also having the support and getting ideas. And there's also so many things we can layer on to Client Tether. There's our new VA virtual assistant program, or if you need a VA, we can offer that to you. We have people that can write content. We provide so many other things to provide help and support and help you grow as well. And I want to ask you too, Deanie, like on the content side, you brought up earlier how you constantly are kind of changing your content. What have you learned about? I know a lot of brokers and consultants want to know what's the best messaging for me? What's the best subject line? Should I use video? Can you give us any tips or ideas on how you found success modifying your content or your messaging too?
Well, sure. So one of the things was, and to your point with the extra support that you give, there are regular video instructional webinar sessions that you do through BAI for us
Yeah.
that always have some kind of extra data, like research that you've done, suggestions on what's working, what's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like just kind of on top of, and that's actually open to any BAI broker. You don't even have to be a client for that. So
Yeah.
that's helpful to have kind of that high level perspective on here's what's happening in the industry and in lead gen and managing your leads. And so that is helpful. From some of those webinars, and then just from, just trying to research everything that possibly would work and just tweaking, even with just some, previous marketing background. I do have an introductory video in my first two emails are almost exactly the same because no one opens the first one. So I treat that second one as kind of like the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a short video, just me like, hey, I'm Deanie. Here's just a little bit about me.
Yeah.
That was a 2-minute video. And because you can track all of that, like I host that on Vimeo, and I could see that at about 50 seconds, everybody was dropping off, anyone, who was looking at it.
Yeah.
So I cut that back to a 60-second video.
Mm-hmm.
And so, people click on it, they do look at it. I don't think I get a ton of response from that, exactly from that first email. There are people who do the Calendly, they'll book from that email. But I have gotten a little bit of feedback from people I talk to that like a video, it just they know I'm a real person.
Right.
So I don't even know if they have to listen to the whole thing or view the whole thing to say, okay, this is a real person.
Mm-hmm.
And we just make our judgments. That's how we are. And so I think that video is probably effective. One of my goals is to add some additional videos throughout the entire drip campaign, and maybe make those, I don't even know what the topics would be yet, but maybe something that, and I'd have to experiment with it, like what would be something of value, even if I drop some things like, hey, here's a little bit of info about the FDD, or the process, or I don't know what would resonate with people, but I feel like that maybe would be something that could get someone to spend a tiny bit more time on an email. So I do think video, it seems like you have to do video in marketing now.
Yeah.
For that. For the texting, so I try to stay at least within maybe 150 characters. I think that's kind of a threshold kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But my initial text was longer, and you can, because with the system you can throw in automatically like the first name, the brand name, all that, so it feels pretty personal. The longer texts felt like I wasn't really getting much response, so I shortened it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think I made it too open-ended, almost like, hey, text me back if you want to, I don't know, if you want info or something like that.
Right.
And people would just text back, hi. And
Yeah.
so I'm thinking, okay, it's okay. So you texted me back. That's why I asked you to do. So, tweaking some of that, trying to figure out what do I really want them to do? What action do I want them to do? Um, I feel like you just have to tweak that and kind of experiment with that. And so, I've just kind of, so now I'm kind of experimenting with, you have time for a call right now, or you have time to talk, or do you want info? Just super short. And there's also, it's short, but it also has that very inviting, to opt out, reply stop, but but
Yeah.
in that first one. But it seems like I'm getting people to um, engage, and I guess that's the difference between just, yeah, I'll reply and then never, because I immediately then I'll say, hey, do you have time right now or whatever? And sometimes it's like they just texted that and went somewhere.
Yeah.
And so part of it, I think, is just tweaking with that. But um, the email content, I obsess about that. And so in some of mine, I have like graphic, like images, not graphic images. That sounds
Right.
triple X. Like I'll do an image that's a header at the
Right.
beginning of that, just to say, okay, if they only read that, they kind of get the point.
Yep.
And then I don't know if it's obnoxious or not, but I like go through the email and I only bold the words. If they only read those bold words, they would actually get my message
Hmm.
instead of all the other stuff. I'm
Right.
a skimmer, and so I assume other people would be bored reading the whole thing.
Right.
So I don't know. I also try to copy what other gurus are doing when I sign up for people's email lists. I just kind of observe, what do I read? What do I actually do? And some of the emails are super long that some of these people are sending, but they must be interesting because I'm reading them. And then
Right.
other ones I completely skip. So I'm trying to observe, you know, maybe I'm a typical candidate for myself. So what do I respond to? And part of it is just, there is the reporting part of Clienttether. And so I was able to go in and see what emails are people actually opening.
Hmm.
And there are certain emails that have like a 46 to 52% open rate.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
and I thought that, that's pretty good. It's not all of them. There's one um, and it's really far in. It's maybe like 6 or 7 weeks in. The topic is genes and business. The
Hmm.
right fit matters.
Yeah.
And people just open that. I don't know, I guess because it's something about genes. I don't know. So I
Yeah.
just play around with all that stuff. But what's nice about the system, back to the system, is I could kind of just see, well, which ones are they opening,
Right. Right.
and see if there's a pattern. I'd like to see what kind of pattern there is.
And based on that pattern, I mean, what are you kind of learning? Does it seem like the messaging that's more educational or emotionally driven? Because I'm assuming your candidates, obviously, there's a lot of questions they have, there's a lot of fear they have, there's a lot of, I'm not sure about this. I mean, what do you think is the most impactful strategy for developing good content? Is it touching on the emotions? Is it being more of a resource? Is it providing data? What have you kind of seen in your experience with that in terms of what has been most engaging for you and them?
Yeah, I think to some degree that's all over the board.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to focus on, and even with the dog training business, we completely have redone all of the drip campaigns.
Hmm.
And I think there are some people who they want to read and be educated by, because a lot of people, it's surprising to me every time, really don't know much at all about franchising.
Right.
They might know a little bit about business, but they don't know anything about franchising. And so I think I could jump to the conclusion why I need to, they would really find value in educating them through my email drip campaign. But I have to remember that the sole purpose of my drip campaign and my initial drip campaign is to get them on the phone.
Hmm.
And so I want to educate them with all of my other pieces of information, my supplemental documents I can send them, my experience that I have. I don't want to do that passively. I want to do that actively. So I'm trying to rethink, and that's why I'm always tweaking. Um, the entire goal of my drip campaign is not to educate them, it is to get them to call
Mm-hmm.
or to agree to meet with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And so, I'll probably go back through again after I've done, this periodically. I do this kind of research
Mm-hmm.
and say, is every single message getting them at least somewhat emotionally connected? Am I triggering something in them?
Mm-hmm.
But is it getting them to say, yeah, I got to talk to her.
Yeah.
She's probably going to maybe she'll answer my questions.
Yeah.
That's really the only goal of the whole campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we kind of wrap this up, Deanie, I want to ask you too, like you've had some success using the system. You've had people move forward in the process. Obviously, some of that is you. A lot of that's you and just your ability, your skills, your ability to work with people. But also, how does the technology enable that? I mean, we talked about the campaigns, but can you kind of pick out some specific tips or ideas for people that are considering Client Tether or just listening to this and going, maybe I should think about this. Um, what like pieces of or functions of the system have enabled that pipeline motion forward for you?
Well, one of the things is I visually like to be able to see the pipeline, how it's laid out.
Yeah.
And so, I like the whole list, just a long chronological list also. But I love that I can just click and grab someone's name and push it through the pipeline and visually see that's where they are.
Yeah.
Because then at any moment of the day, even like in the morning, I can look at that and say, okay, that's the column I need to do XYZ.
Hmm.
I need to make sure of this, push them there. And it's just a very quick snapshot to know where I am without having to run a report or anything. It's just visually there. And I'm visual. So I like the boxes. I like to be able to see visually where people are in that process. And it's kind of fun pushing them to the right, click and drag them to the right. That means it's getting better, right?
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
eventually you get to the win column, and that's the goal. So the other thing that, haven't mentioned at all is I have been, as I've been doing territory checks, I have just entered the franchisor's information. And so it makes it a lot easier for me to do territory checks. Now, I think there are some systems that I've heard that some consultants just do a mass territory check that just, you know, machine guns out to brands. And
Right.
I don't do that. I don't even know if we could do that, but I like that I set up a template that gives me a big start on doing a territory check. And I might do 10 checks for one person,
Hmm.
depending on, what they're interested in. And I like that it's just an email template, but I can load those franchisor contact names, and I can paste into the little whiteboard area that contact information and who it is. And it just makes it easy to do those territory checks. The territory checks before, it was a nightmare. I felt
Hmm.
like it's like such a manual process. And so that has really streamlined my time, which helps to have more time to push the people through the pipeline, because I'm not worrying about, typing these dreadful territory checks. It's just, okay, I have a
Yeah.
template, I customize it, and boom, it's out. And it can be very quick.
And you make a good point because with the action plans, we're talking about the emails going out. What's interesting is that you can actually send out an email and exclude the lead. So you can exclude the lead or the candidate if you wanted to email somebody else an update, like the franchisor or somebody else on your team or whatever. You can exclude the candidate from that email and include other people so that the candidate or the lead never sees that, but other people do. And we actually use that I mean, I use it myself pretty often. Um, so it's a great way to get other people involved in the messaging and the automation that need to be involved, but excluding the lead when they don't need to be involved with that message.
Right.
So I think
Right.
that's pretty
Mhm.
powerful. And I'm not sure if other tools do that. I'm sure they do, but I think it's really applicable to this type of industry. So that's good. Well, Deanie, I appreciate you being on the episode here, sharing your experience with Client Tether to all the brokers out there listening. Are there any other tips or ideas you can share, even if it's beyond Client Tether, for people listening that are getting into the industry or looking at systems as we kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, the only thing is that for me, it's been helpful to have the tools
Yeah.
to try to do this. I think what we'd call old fashioned. Um, I mean, there are some really big companies out there now that are pulling brokers, and they're using very sophisticated systems. And so I'm just one person. I
Yeah.
think there's still a lot of us, one person businesses out there.
Right.
uh I really feel like it's imperative to be able to use some of these tools. And so for me, Client Tether has been great. And that's, I don't know really how I would keep track of it all and be able to receive the number of leads that I want to receive without having a system like this to use,
Yeah.
just as one person. There's
Right.
no other person here taking those and categorizing them and doing anything. It's me. so
Right.
so if you're a one person show, this is one of those tools I think that's essential.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it. We love working with you all and with BAI. And don't forget, I mean, it's April 22nd today, but next month is the BAI conference in Las Vegas. So if you're listening to this and you're going to that, you can say hello to myself and Dave, our CEO. We'll both be there. So we're excited to meet everybody at BAI. If you listen to this after that, no worries. You can still meet us online or at some point in the future. So uh, Deanie, it's been great talking to you. I really appreciate you coming on and telling your story with Client Tether. And I hope that, you know, more people will be drawn to using us with BAI and out there as well. So if people do want to reach you, they have questions about, your usage or they're interested in what you're doing in the franchise space, how can they reach out to you? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is, probably through email. It's Deene, Deene, at my5rocks.com. The
Mhm.
five is a number. That's probably the easiest way. Or Five Rocks Franchise Consultants, Google that, and you'll find me.
Great, great. Well, Jeannie, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let's keep in touch, and I wish you all the luck with everything you're doing, and we'll keep this conversation going.
Thanks, Ryan. This was fun. Have a good one.
You too. Hey, this is Ryan with the Business Stories Podcast, and if you're a franchisor, franchise consultant, broker, or just a small business owner, you've got to check out ClientTether.com. It's an amazing sales automation tool that is revolutionizing the industry. If you want to learn more, go to ClientTether.com and inquire within.